Well, it depends if you're counting. Yeah, it says,
Oh, she did it. She's
yes,
on it. There
okay,
we go.
we're on it. We're on. So if Trevor shows up, I'll just announce that he's here. I've got it on, what do you call it, where you can see everybody. Yes, Virginia.
Hey, Tom. So I was having issues getting on with the with what was sent in the calendar notice, and I texted the guys. It looks like Trevor is also having problems, so I will let him know about the email that's sitting in our inbox, and hopefully we can get him on.
Yeah, I got on the calendar thing. You just have to scroll down to the very bottom. I got something that got me on the website of the finance department, which, as interesting as it was not where I wanted to be.
He also said his username is Grant still. It's his son's name. So if he's waiting in the waiting room and it's Grant, that's actually Trevor. So
Sounds
he's
good.
waiting. Thanks.
So Shannon, are you looking into this or should we just start?
He's not in the waiting room. If you want to go ahead and start, and we'll let him in when he gets in.
Okay, that's fine. So are we ready to go now? Yes?
Go for it.
This is the duly scheduled meeting of the City of Salem Finance Committee. I am Tom Anderson. I am a city councilor and I am chair of the committee. And I see the entire committee is here, and I would ask if you would introduce yourself, starting with the lowest numbered ward and going to the highest numbered ward. So this is a test.
Hey, everybody. Virginia Stapleton, Ward 1 City Councilor.
Hi, this is Trevor Phillips, Ward 3 City Councilor.
Member Jose Gonzalez, City Councilor, Ward 5.
And there are staff members and members of our audit team who will introduce themselves as appropriate. The first item is to call the meeting to order. I guess I should have done that before we introduced everybody, but I hereby call the meeting to order. Then in our packet was the approval of our last minutes, which was last year in mid-December. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as written?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second. Thank you. Any discussion? Will the recorder call the roll, please?
Member Stapleton?
Aye.
Member Phillips?
Aye.
Member Gonzalez?
Aye.
Chair Anderson?
Aye.
Thank you.
Second item on the agenda is the public comment. Staff folks, do we have anyone who's here to comment from the public at this meeting?
No, we do not, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So the next one is action items. It doesn't look like we have any action items. Is that correct, Mr. Eggleston?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so then we move to the management update. And we've got a principal, I'm sure, of Grove, Mueller, and Swank here to talk to us. And I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name, Ryan. So if you could introduce yourself, or Josh, you take over. Maybe you want to introduce Ryan and move the discussion along.
Sure, just real quick. I'll let Ryan introduce himself, but I just want to thank Jenny Matichek and Jeremy Morgan for getting our audit complete, or not our audit, but our annual conference and financial report. It just changed, so it's not a comprehensive one anymore. It's just an annual one. But I just want to thank them for their efforts and really took to the last minute, so December 31st. So I appreciate their time and effort on that. And Jenny, do you want to say anything and introduce Ryan?
I don't think I have any comments for the financial statements, but I think it was great to work with Ryan and his team. We all work really well together, so I'll let Ryan introduce himself because I can't pronounce his last name either.
See, that's why I go by Ryan P most of the time. It's just easier that way. I don't care. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Ryan Pascarella. I am a principal at Grove, Mueller, and Swank, as you predicted. And I was in charge of really completing the audit for the city of Salem this year. There was another principal that worked on it, but it fell on me to kind of finish the audit off. And yes, I was the one that was involved on December 31st, making sure that it was submitted timely. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the City of Salem audit and how it went, but also we performed the audit of the Urban Renewal Agency as well. So that is part of this. First, I figured I would just talk a little bit about what an audit entails. It's helpful for the committee to understand kind of what our role is as an auditor and really what the city's responsibility is at the same time. So the audit was performed under generally accepted auditing standards. Those are set up by the American Institute of CPAs, and they are basically just universal to US audits and how things need to be performed. On top of that, there's an additional auditing requirement under government auditing standards that really increases the amount of reporting that's needed if there are any significant findings. But we also look harder into compliance with significant grant agreements or other laws and regulations that are really significant to the city. Not every entity is required to be audited under government auditing standards, but since the city spends quite a bit of federal money on an annual basis, those rules kick in as well. So you're going to see reports not only for just a standard financial audit, but also government auditing standards. And really, you're going to see 6 or 7 different reports that are being issued as part of this. Okay. So what is an audit? Really, an audit is, well, we start the process for your June 30 year end. We start the process in about May. And really what that entails is having communications with the city as far as, okay, what's happened during the year? Are there any significant turnover in staff, especially related to how money is being collected and distributed? And so really just figure out what's different from the prior year. Since we did audit in the prior year, we have a good base of information for how the city works. But every year there's changes, especially in 2020 and 2021. Processes really seem to change based on more remote working and everything. So we get an understanding of that. And we also do a basic risk assessment. And what a risk assessment really is we look at the activity for the year and we decide where are the real risks that there are errors in your financial numbers. It's called risk-based auditing. And so we will concentrate more on areas where we really feel there's a risk that the city is reporting things incorrectly. A lot of that comes when there's a real difficult area, but lately it's been more when there's like a new area or something that is happening. A good example is for this upcoming year, there's going to be some new lease standards that are coming out, which really means the city has to rework how those are being reported in the financial statements. So that is going to be one of our riskiest areas for the upcoming year. Other types of risks you'll see, if there's a debt that's been, let's say, or if there's new bonds that have been issued, if something has been restructured, we take a look at that. If there's a lot of significant capital projects that are going on, is that being reflected correctly in the financial statements? But really, that's just our preliminary work to understand how the audit is going to go, or excuse me, where we want the procedures to be. Once we do that, we kind of look at, okay, what are your processes for documenting these transactions, as far as, is there good review over the transactions that are happening? Is it just one person within the city that handles the whole thing, which normally isn't a good option? But we really decide what are your internal controls that really seem to be working well that we want to try to rely on or not. And we will dig into those areas and look at a whole lot of transactions to make sure that what you say your processes are really what are being performed. We also do quite a bit of sampling of actual transactions. We will not look at every transaction that happened in the city during the year. Auditing standards definitely do not require that. So what we do is we do sampling, either random. We will set a scope and look at all transactions over a specific amount. We will look at a specific group of transactions to see if those are accurate. But really, it's all based on that risk assessment that happens. Our audits, we're on site near the end of the year. On site, virtually more now than anything else. But really, we look at We're working for about a week or so, about the end of June. And then we come back in October and we look again once the year-end numbers are completed, and we really audit your year-end numbers and take a look at the annual comprehensive financial report, which that name has changed, as it was pointed out. Since we only sample items within the financial records for the year, we do not give absolute assurance that the numbers in the financial statements are 100% correct. Auditing standards do not require that. We give reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. Okay, and so really that's why we set it up the way we have. We look for the risky areas. We look at the larger dollar amount transactions that happen, trying to make sure that nothing is really missing within the financial statements, and allows us to give reasonable assurance. Somebody once asked why we don't give absolute assurance over the financial statements. Well, first reason is we would be on site 365 days of the year probably, because we would have to look at every single transaction for the city. And you cannot afford that. You don't want to afford that. And luckily, the auditing standards allow for the sampling side instead. All right, so there's that. I am going to, there are some documents that some has been provided to the committee already. Some are still in draft format. And so I'm going to share my screen here with the first item that is in draft format. And that one. There it is. All right. So you should see a letter on the screen that is on our letterhead. This is the governance letter. This is the communication required under the auditing standards that we send directly to the finance committee, the city council, really those charged with governance. Not every audit that we perform do we get the opportunity to sit in front of the finance committee or the city council. Some of them, they're just like, give us our stuff, we'll see you next year kind of thing. Not my favorite, honestly. I like more FaceTime with my clients, but in those instances, we're still required to communicate with the city council. And that's where this letter comes in. It just kind of lays out how the audit went and if there were any significant issues with the audit. So this letter is in draft format at this point because the federal compliance audit is not completed yet. And so we wanted to wait and see if there were any significant issues with the federal compliance audit before we officially issued this letter. So it is sitting in draft format, and I got permission from Jenny today to go ahead and share this in the committee meeting because I don't like to do anything without permission, especially in meetings like this. So what this letter really does is it lays out really your responsibilities and our responsibilities. Your responsibility really being, preparing the annual comprehensive financial report in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. It's your job to have the internal controls in place to make sure you are reporting accurate information. Our job is to come in and look at your financial records and your financial statements to make sure they are free from material misstatement. It lays out in the second paragraph here, kind of what I talked about before about reasonable assurance versus absolute assurance in there. This letter is pretty darn boilerplate from year to year. And so if you've looked at this in previous years, you're going to go, yeah, that's about right. Because it starts from the same thing every time. Really what I say is, look to see if there's anything like negative that's been added to it, because the boilerplate is just like, yep, perfect, everything's good. But then if there's anything else going on, it will be added into here as well. Okay. Talks a little about this timing of it. It does say my firm needs to be independent from the city in order to perform this audit, because we are independent auditors in this respect. So I could not be a city council member, or my wife couldn't be a city council member and perform your audit. So none of that's happening, but we're required to communicate any of that and if there's any ethical issues which have not occurred. Next section talks about kind of the city's accounting practices, and really if there's anything that's changed year over year. Your accounting practices, as far as generally accepted accounting principles, the city follows that. I mean, that's the way it is. We're really looking for things that have changed either in the accounting practices or in the financial reporting. There's one change that is highlighted here, and it relates to the fiduciary activities and how the comprehensive report changed a little bit. I'll show you that, how it changed. Definitely not a significant change to your financial statements. It talks in here about estimates. The numbers in your financial statements, there is a lot of, yes, we paid a bill. Here's the expense. Yes, we collected money. Here's the revenue. But there are a lot of estimates built into these financial statements. And every year it seems like some new reporting requirement comes out and there's new estimates that are happening again. Case in point, the new lease standards for next year. It's going to change it up a little bit. But it talks in here about what some of the significant estimates are. Definitely useful lives of your capital assets. You expense them over their useful lives. And so you kind of have to guess what your useful life is going to be for your equipment, for your buildings, all of that stuff. Probably the one that confuses people the most, well, the two, the PERS net pension liability and the other post-employment benefits liability, and they're related to deferred inflows and outflows. Huh? Exactly. But really what it is, these are actuarial valuations that are done and updated on an annual basis that talk about what the city's future cash flows are going to be related to the PERS unfunded liability and the implicit rate related to health insurance in there. From an auditing standpoint, I'm glad I don't have to do that actuarial work. I am not an actuary. I do not want to be an actuary. I don't know how they do that job, honestly. But what we do is we look at, okay, who's the actuary that's doing it? What are their qualifications? Have there been any significant issues in the past with them? Are they using the correct assumptions? And then if, once we're happy with that, it ends up into the financial statements as a liability within your entity-wide financial statements. So just pointing out, it's not all about money in, money out. There's a lot of things that really make significant swings to what your financial records look like based on the assumptions. And a lot of that's the return on investment at this point. There's a section in here also that talks about if there were any misstatements that we identified during the audit, really any recommendations to changing numbers during the audit. There was nothing material that came up as far as recommendations. There were some entries that were recorded between the original numbers we got and the final numbers we got, but really that was the city just finishing up different areas of the financial statements and providing us adjustments so that we could actually audit them. So nothing significant as far as adjustments this year. Okay. When you get down to the next page, it talks about really there are certain areas of financial statements we don't give a full audit opinion on. We give what's called an in relation to opinion. So basically we look at it, as long as it isn't significantly different than what we audited as far as numbers, it doesn't go completely the wrong direction, then we're fine with it. And most of what you're seeing in here, well, part of it relates to, I guess, the financial reporting standards, but part of it relates to what the state of Oregon wants. So you're going to see pretty long narrative in here. Really, state of Oregon wants us to look at your budget to actual schedules and make sure that there's nothing out of whack with them. The national guidelines don't require that really, but the state of Oregon does. And so we've added some of that. And basically the state of Oregon wants us to do more work, but which isn't really a surprise at this point. So there's that document. Are there any questions on that letter before I move on to the next area? I should have said, interrupt me, please.
I was about to ask that, Ryan, and I would have pronounced your last name the same way you did. When you say the year end, we're just so everybody is clear, we're talking about the fiscal year, not the calendar year, even though you just had to have the report finished by the end of the calendar year?
Yes. So the financial statements are prepared on the fiscal year, so ending June 30th. The Secretary of State's office requires that the audited financial statements be turned into the audits division within 6 months of the end of the fiscal year, which means December 31st. There is also, the city gets the GFOA certificate. Really, they submit the financial statements to the national organization for review to see if it really meets the financial reporting requirements. That is also due on December 31st. So we want to make sure it's done by that point because you want to hit both of those deadlines. So yes, that's.
Okay, thank you very much. Does any other member of the committee have questions for Mr. Pascarella? So why don't you move on then to the.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Yeah, go ahead, Trevor.
So Tom, your question was my question, but during the answer, I became less confident that I understood what was going on. So is the audit for the same time frame that we budget for as a city? We do, through the end of June. Is the audit through the end of June and then due by December 31st? Or is there data included in the audit that goes past our yearly budget into December?
From a number standpoint and all the schedules, it is through June 30th of 2021. And that's really kind of what the front of the financial statements show. The one little caveat to that would be there's an area in the footnotes that talks about subsequent events. So if something significant happened to the city, new debt being taken out, something like that, that really should be communicated. Maybe coronavirus relief funds coming in or something like that. That goes into subsequent events. Didn't happen during your fiscal year, but it's probably important enough it should be mentioned in there somewhere. Okay. So this is the annual comprehensive financial report. It used to be called the comprehensive annual financial report. So they really just flipped the first two words in it. And so now we're all still adjusting to the new name, and it is now called the ACFR is the acronym for it. So bear with me if you hear a pause right before I say that name. Oh, too many years of the other version of it, I guess. So here is your annual comprehensive financial report for you. There are only maybe, I'm going to say 5 pages in this 238-page document that belong to me. The city put together the remaining pages. I basically have 2 reports in there, and the rest is you. I'll say very intimidating document for those that don't understand, all the nuances of governmental accounting and governmental reporting. What I do like to point out in this document is there are a couple of, I'm going to scroll down to the table of contents. Some people really like narratives versus here, have a bunch of tables of numbers and what am I even looking at kind of thing. So when you're in the ACFR, there's the letter of transmittal starting on page 1. And then there's your management discussion and analysis starting on page 15. Letter of transmittal basically just describes the city itself, kind of describes the economic environment of it, and is really just so you understand kind of what's happening. The management discussion and analysis starting on page 15, that compares what happened last year versus the current year under audit, and is still a very narrative component. So you can really understand how things have changed between fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21. Very, very good read, essentially. And it just gives you an understanding of what's happening. As you go down through the financial statements, you're going to get into more and more detail, all the way down to here's our individual funds, here's our budget to actual schedules within there. Really goes a long ways. So I'm going to show you first of all the audit report here on starting on page 11, and it's 11 within this document. Yet again, something else on my letterhead. And this is a little over 2 pages long, really describing the audit again. So I gave you the letter, but this also talks about kind of what the responsibilities are related to it. This says we have audited the governmental activities, business type activities, aggregate discretely presented component unit, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information. Talk about how much fun it is to audit a government. So we give not just like an opinion, we give opinions on individual areas within the financial statements. I'd say we probably in this audit probably give 8 to 10 opinions overall within it based on how the rules work. So it's not just like we look at everything as a whole. We really have to break it down into individual pieces, such as we look at the general fund on its by itself to make sure that we're comfortable with the activity within the general fund. It talks about a discretely presented component unit. That is Salem Housing Authority. It is rolled into here kind of in its own column. It isn't added into your numbers for the city, but it's being reported in there just because of the overlap of the city council that's in there. So if you read through this, basically, all it's going to tell you is we give you an unmodified opinion, we give you a clean opinion. We do not feel that there are any material errors within the financial statements as it relates to that reasonable assurance that we talked about. That didn't work. Page 68 within here. I talked about the fiduciary activities changing a little bit. So here, this is a schedule that was in the financial statements before. Fiduciary activities, basically money the city is holding that isn't the city's money, whether it's being held on behalf of employees or something else. And so this schedule has been in there for, for quite a few years, ever since I started doing, auditing. So it's in here saying that there's roughly about, $1 million sitting there that really doesn't belong to the city, but it's in the city's bank accounts. So it's just being reported. The change, they want, there we go. They want to show the ins and the outs of that $1 million essentially during the year. This schedule did not exist before, but it shows you that overall about 1.5 million was collected related to that, and about 1.6 million was dispersed related to that. Therefore ending up with about $1 million overall in the end. This is the one change really related to that new pronouncement, which really isn't a big change overall, because my guess is this was way back in the back of your financial statements last year. It just got moved up to the front for you.
So sorry to interrupt. If it's okay, Chair Anderson, what is this, like, in broad concepts? You're trying to tell me what it is, but I'm not quite there.
All right. Oh, I just saw Jenny light up. I thought she was going to start talking there.
I'll tell you, it's a good thing. Ryan is saying that we did everything right and our reports look terrific and there are no irregularities.
So that I heard loud and clear. I agree. But in this new report of the $1 million, like, is this like overcharges that aren't actually ours, or like what is this concept that you're drawing our attention to? The specifics. Yeah, this page and the next.
If I may, I can provide an example. So if you pay a vehicle citation, there's a portion that goes to the county and the state. So this could be held for those purposes and then paid out to the other governments. So we receipt the funds, we hold in our bank account, and then we distribute it out to those other agencies.
Yeah, another good example would be like a health reimbursement account where an employee earns the money, but it's still sitting in the city's bank account, but it's not the city's money anymore. So it ends up in some type of other report here instead, just showing really what you're holding on behalf of somebody else.
Okay, thank you for those examples. I think I've gotten fully there conceptually now. I appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. Always feel free to interrupt me. If you don't understand, it's easier to talk about it right at that point and give examples. There you go. I also wanted to point out, when you get down farther into there, there was an adjustment made to the beginning numbers for the year. So basically how the audit finished last year and your numbers for June 30 of 2020, there was an adjustment made to those as it relates to these financial statements. And it was it says incorrectly. Yeah. So there was some construction projects, I guess, that were not accurately reported in the prior year financial statements. So we adjusted our beginning numbers for the current year so that way they were shown correctly in the current year. I don't know if Jenny, if you want to talk any more about that, but some pretty good sized numbers in there. So.
Yeah, I don't have a lot on these information or on these adjustments, but Jeremy and I discussed going over these in depth to plan so that we can put in controls to prevent it from happening again.
And this is not uncommon, especially when we're talking about like a public works department. Sometimes the communication as far as the individual projects they're working on doesn't always make it to the financial department, the finance department in the best way. It doesn't mean that there were expenses that were recorded that were not recorded in the prior year, but the expenses were reported. I mean, you paid the bills. It's really when it gets to the financial statements, how it was being reported. That's the issue with it. As far as should it have been a capital asset for the city versus just an expense for the city. And so that's really what we're talking about here. Not that there was an error with the finance department. They had the best information they had at that point. Okay. And then the last thing I want to show you in this document, I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. If we do on top of the financial audit, we have to perform some procedures over Oregon revised statutes. In this report, there's a list here of the areas that the Secretary of State's office, really the legislature, and then Secretary of State's office kind of tells us exactly how to handle it. These are the areas that we look at if they are significant to the city. So we will look to make sure that the money that the cash being held is in accounts that are collateralized based on the ORSs. Really, you're going to be over your 250,000 FDIC limit. So there's a collateralization pool that the cash needs to be in. We look to make sure you're in compliance with your debt, that you follow local budget law, you get gas tax money, so is it being spent correctly on the streets and the roads, those types of things that the legislature is telling us to look at. You had and we look at these on an annual basis. There were no findings related to this for the city or for the URA at that point. So clean opinion on those as well. Now, I'm assuming that I basically this is all my meeting at this point, right? I know it's from 4 to 5. Do I have a cutoff for anything? I've probably got maybe 10 minutes left.
Ryan, the council members have a 5:30 executive session. That doesn't mean you have to go to 5:25 though.
No, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't something else he needed to do after this.
No.
It looked to me like this was my hour to do some talking and to answer questions. So we performed the audit over the Urban Renewal Agency as well. One of the, yet again, governmental, reporting. The Urban Renewal Agency is actually being shown in 2 different places. One, it's its own separate legal entity. So I can show you, oh, look, here is the annual financial report for the URA, right? This financial activity, and I'm just going to scroll down to where you see your individual funds. Keep going. Okay, individual funds. So these funds are actually they're also included in the city. Since the city really controls the URA. I mean, it's the city council that's involved. This is what's called a discreetly presented component unit. So it would be wrong to not include these in the city's ACFR because the city really controls it. But since it's a legal separate entity, it also has its own financial report. So you're going to see these numbers in both of the financial statements. The opinion on this is clean as well. We didn't find anything that we thought would cause material issues with it. So we gave a clean, reasonable assurance on this one as well. And like I said, there were no findings related to the Oregon revised statute testing. So that is this document. Are there questions on kind of what the difference is between these two documents? All kinds of fun. All right. The last thing, and the real reason that governance letter is not finalized yet, is because of the federal compliance audit. So we talked about the due dates for the ACFR and for the URA as well, was 12/31. You have 6 months to file it. The federal compliance audit is really completely separate from those other documents. It's its own independent audit that's happening. And it is due within 9 months of the end of the fiscal year. So it will be due March 31st. I'll show you, there's going to be a couple of letters in here yet again, which are all from us. Once you get past that, there is this thing called the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards. You'll see it's marked completely as draft, but we're real darn close to having this thing done. And we'll be done with this soon. So this lists all of the federal grant expenditures for the year. That's the simplest way to put it. Money expended during the year. If you happen to have gotten a federal grant that you haven't spent any money on yet, it would not be included in here. And it could be money coming directly from the federal government or money that is passed through other agencies and ultimately makes it to the city, and the city spends it. So you're going to see in here sometimes direct funding. So this HUD money came directly from HUD. It didn't go through any state agencies. Lots of it, but you're going to see down here, you get into pass through. So it talks about pass through. So it started with the feds, came through some other organization, ultimately ended up at the city. This splits out all of the federal money expended by the funding stream. And there are very, very specific requirements on year to year on which programs we look at. If they're large programs that haven't been looked at recently, we will look at those. But we don't have to look at all the large programs every year. We kind of cycle through them, is what we do. So when I scroll down through this document, you're going to see that the city expended about $6.5 million during the year. And so we ended up taking a sample of these grant programs and we're auditing them. We're going to end up auditing 4 different funding streams during the year. We have completed 3 of the 4 at this point. And the only one left is this coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. And really the ARPA funding is what we are looking at related to this. There are some questions on what the dollar amount is it needs to be on that schedule of expenditure federal awards and really what work needs to be done. The assistance for determining how to audit the program, I mean, the feds put out quite a bit of information for it. The information has been trickling in. And so we just want to make sure that we do it correctly before we issue it. So we're looking through the documentation that's being provided, asking for clarification. Pretty much done with the testing, but I don't want to be wrong. I mean, that's just flat out what it is. Nobody wants to reissue any of this stuff. And so since we have until March 31st, not that we're going to wait that long, we just haven't issued it at this point. So Jenny. Yep.
Excuse me, Ryan and Josh, I presume then that at one of our next meetings, we will look at the finalized version of this report.
For the single audit,
Well, I don't know. I mean, are you presenting everything here that has been done and that will not come back to us? Only the fourth of the four that have not been done, or will we see the whole report again?
we can certainly bring back the final version when it's complete.
No, that's not what I was asking. I don't need to see it. If we're seeing the first three now, no reason to bring back the others. So what you will show us in the future is the final quarter of the reports. And you're nodding your head there, Ryan?
What I would recommend is
Okay.
if I determine that there's any significant findings or anything, have me back and let me talk about it.
Okay.
Otherwise, let's just assume that this works. I don't think there's going to be any findings. We're too close to the end, I think, to really find the finding at this point.
That is fine. I would be happy to go with your recommendation.
We will do that then. But always feel free to reach out and ask me questions. That's what I'm for. All right. So I guess that's the fourth document that I have. So now I want to just open it up and see. It doesn't even have to really relate to what I've just shown you. Are there other questions that you would like to ask your auditor at this point?
Any other members of the Finance Committee have any questions? I can see Counselor Phillips, and I can't see, let me click down. I can see Counselor Stapleton, and I see Counselor Gonzalez's name. Does anybody have any questions?
Not on my end.
Well, that's terrific. And thank you for this exciting report, Ryan. I'm
Let-
sure it's exciting to you and it's exciting to us in a mundane way because we need your good services and the staff people's good services, Jenny and Josh and everybody else on the staff, because we have an obligation to make sure that this government is being run at least fiscally in the right way. And so we appreciate your services and we appreciate all the staff who work under Josh, all their fine contributions to this.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that because when the finance department, knows what they're doing, they really want to put out a quality product. They're making sure that from day to day things are being done the same way. It really helps us as auditors. I appreciate the quick response that I was getting from the staff, just trying to finish up everything, even though it did take till December 31st to get it finished up. It was easy to have conversations and get the things finalized that needed to be.
Well, that comes as no surprise, I'm sure, to the rest of the council members on this group. Is there anybody else who has any questions for Ryan here about the reports he's given us? Ryan, I have one last question. Did your firm used to have an office in Cottage Grove?
No, we have not been in Cottage Grove. We've been in Albany before.
Okay, no, that's fine. When I was a lawyer in private practice, I think there was a Mueller firm down in Cottage Grove that I was an arbitrator on, the partner dissolution, and it was just a big mess. And that was 30 years ago, though.
Yeah, well, we were formed in about 1980 as
Yeah, so that would've
some
been
variation of Grove, Mueller, and Swank. That's changed
Okay,
over the
okay.
years.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else we need from Ryan, Josh?
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Okay, and Ryan, I'm sure you want to stay to listen to all the exciting things we have to do with continuing business, but if you need to take off, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. I will get out of here.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is continued business, and Mr. Eggleston and I talked about this in our pre-meeting meeting. At the minutes of the last meeting in December show that each one of the four members of this committee asked for certain discussion of certain other items relating to finance. I wanted about bonding and the steering committee, and I think we're getting that. Member Phillips wanted the marijuana tax increase and how is it used toward a sobering center. Member Stapleton wanted to look at forecasts with an eye toward unhoused, climate action, ways to save money. And Member Gonzalez wanted to discuss the city operation since COVID and how has COVID affected the cost and any reduction to the city. And Mr. Eggleston and I talked about that, and it's his plan to roll each one of these out in future meetings to respond to those questions. So we will all get the answers. Is that correct, Josh?
That is correct. I do want to give one update on the marijuana tax increase. That bill was reintroduced in the short session.
Okay.
So we'll be taking that to the legislative committee to support that bill also.
Okay. Well, I happen to be on the legislative committee, so I'll see you then too. And I think, I don't know, Member Stapleton, are you the alternative? The alternate on that committee? Okay.
No, that's Jose, I think.
Yeah. Jose, are you? You don't know.
It is right. Yeah, that's right. I am on that one. Yeah,
Okay.
but I think everybody pretty much attends it. But
Yeah, we
I'm
like
there
that
back you.
committee. So it's rare that you will have somebody not being able to show up for that. Okay, new business. Do we have any new business? Going once? That's all it's gonna go, not 2 or 3 times. All right, so unless there's anything else, I'm adjourning this meeting, and we will see everybody in the finance department at the next meeting, and I will see the counselors in about, hold on, I'll tell you, in 43 minutes. So thank you very much, Josh, and everybody else who's doing the work. I'm leaving the meeting, and I'm sure somebody will shut everybody off. Thanks.